I love Christmas. I'm basic that way. So I have made a winter wonderland cake for this tutorial. It's a painted cake, and I have to admit, it's a little more advanced than some of the painted cake tutorials I've been doing, but I think you guys are ready for it. Give it a try. Don't be scared. I mean, it's only cake. If you mess up, you can start over, but you know, do it on a practice cake first. Here it is. Can you see it? It's got a new fun technique using an airbrush. I really love using the airbrush for this. I think you'll enjoy it too. I hope you try it. Just be free and let your creativity just ooze out. I think you'll see you're capable, and I think you're gonna have a good time. Once again, if you have any tutorial ideas you wanna see, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. And if you do try this or any of the cakes from my past tutorials, go ahead and tag me in any pictures in Instagram, my Instagram name. I also would love to see any of your work. So excited. All right, you know, like and subscribe, same old, same old. Okay, so I start off with a fondant cake, and then to protect the board, I'm just gonna take strips of parchment paper and a little bit of tape, and I'm gonna tape it down to the board like this, going all the way around, but the tape up against the edge of your fondant at the base. So I just go all the way around like that, getting as close to the base as I can with the tape. Okay, so I have it going all the way around. So I got this airbrush online. It's not the same one I use at work. The one at work is a little more involved and bigger, but I thought I would try this one. It was only like $55. Seems pretty reasonable to me. So all you do is charge it, and then you just screw this in like that. And then all you have to do is you put your color inside here, turn on the little compressor, and there you go. So I haven't painted a cake with it yet, so we're gonna see. I did test it out and it seemed to work pretty good. So we're gonna try it out on this cake. All right, so I'm just gonna mix up some color. I have a little bit of sky blue in there. Let's try a little navy blue, just a drop. And then I just want a touch of black, so I just dipped a Q-tip in there. And I diluted it with a little vodka. So I'm just gonna pour a tiny bit in here. And then I'm gonna test it on a white paper towel. So I like that tone. All right, let's prep for spraying. Okay, so I've got my cake stand all packed into this little box to protect the outside area from overspray. And I'm just going to fill my airbrush container with the mixture, cap it. I'm gonna try to get it darker at the bottom and sort of fade up as I go to the top. I'm gonna start with the front, just in case I run out of some color, it won't be such a big deal. All right. So I'm just using back and forth motions. I'm about 3 inches away from my cake. And to get it darker, I'm just going to stay there a little bit longer. I don't want to go in too close because that makes it have a sharper line. So I think I want the sky to be fairly blue. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is going back in at the bottom with a little bit more saturated color to make it a little darker. And then I hit the top too. And you don't have to worry about getting it totally smooth and even, since the blue is going to represent the sky. A little bit of a mottled look is good because some of the lighter areas will look kind of like clouds. So this thing is working great. I love when a purchase works out. Okay, so I just mixed a little bit more in my shot glass here. And it's the same colors, I just used less vodka to dilute it, so it should be a little bit darker. Also, I'm making a giant mess, so you might want to use some gloves. So now I'm just going around the bottom, darken it up some. I'm just going to fade that up a little bit. I think the key is just to keep your hand moving and keep the cake turning. And sometimes move your hand maybe in a different direction if you notice that you're getting a little streaky, just to blend it a little bit. You can even do little circles. And when you're done, always be sure to clean out your machine. Don't let the color just dry in there. So I usually just fill it with some vodka, sort of swash it around, pour that out, fill it with some more, and then spray it until it runs clear. And then just sort of take a paper towel and dry it out up inside of the cup. First things first, I'm going to prepare my palette. So I'm just gonna start with the same colors that I used before. So they were sky blue, navy, and black. You can use whatever blues you have handy. So I'm just gonna squirt a little bit of each on my palette. I like to use these big palettes because it gives you a lot of mixing room. I'm going to put the black separate just because I don't know how much I'm going to actually use. And then I have my vodka, as always. And then I like to keep a separate little section on my palette with some clear vodka. Now, actually, to start, you don't even need any paint because we are going to paint the mountains using a subtractive method. So we're just going to be wiping away to create mountains. It's so fun. So first off, I'm just going to dip into the clear vodka. I think this is probably the scary part for people because they're afraid to mess up, which is totally understandable. But if that's the case, you can always start in the back. And the first thing you have to do is decide where you want your light to come from. So where is the sun shining? Is it shining down this way? Is it shining down this way? Because that is where you want the white to be. Okay, so you always have to keep that in mind. That's where your highlights are going to be. That's where the white is going to be. So that is very important to decide at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to have my sunlight sort of down in this way. So if the sun was up here, okay? And the second important thing to remember is you don't want your mountain just to be like triangular peaks like this, unless you're going for a stylized look. But if you're trying to go for somewhat of a natural look, then you just have to be more organic about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start wiping away with my paintbrush. And you can see that it makes some darker streaks and some really white streaks. And that is going to be a saving grace for you in this. And also it's going to make the painting look really cool. The more you go in with your vodka, the more you can wipe away. And I'm just sort of going to wiggle my brush around. Because it gives it a texture. And right now it looks like a crazy mess. And that is okay. So that is one side of a mountain. Can you tell? Probably not. So if you bring it down, I'm always dabbing sort of the extra vodka off. Can you see it forming? So it sort of looks like the light's hitting here. Maybe there's a little valley that's creating a shadow right here. And then another face with the mountain. So skip that area. Maybe if you want your mountain to end there. And then I can come in and just start working my brush again to create another mountain that is sort of in front of that mountain. And I'm honestly not thinking too much about it. I'm just sort of going for it. If I want there to be a little bit of an area back here, just took that away. And now it's like this mountain has another little crest back here tucked away. And I mean, and honestly, mountains can form in every sort of formation in every type of way. So it's kind of hard to get it wrong and be like, that looks unrealistic. I mean, it's very organic, very playful. Don't beat yourself up over it and just go in there. Some areas are going to be flat top like this, some are going to be pointy like this, and that's going to make it look more natural and realistic. And the good part is you're always usually going to find one area you like the best, and then that can just be your front. But I really like the way that this technique creates a dark rim around what you take away. I think that just gives you shadows without even having to try. And I think it's good to be aware of height changes. So don't make your mountains all end right at the same height. Have some lower, have some higher to create more visual interest. Have some little sections that jet up like that and do something playful. And then you're going to meet back up around with the first mountain. So for me, as I'm doing this, like I don't have a mountain range in mind. It just sort of presents itself as I start scribbling away. If you're not comfortable with that, you can always look up a painting online or maybe a photograph and try to mimic it, but don't get too pristine with it. Okay. And like going back, like I don't really like this whole line being solid, so I'm going to come in and break up the line a little bit. And you can sort of push that blue around to get the shadows where you want them. And go back around and pull out more white, like maybe there's a peak back here where the sunlight is hitting. Sometimes you almost have to scrub the paint a little bit with your paintbrush. But that's why it's important, again, I've said it on all my painting tutorials, that you need to get a watercolor brush. A decent quality watercolor brush. I love this one. It's a round. It's round. It holds a lot of liquid, but it also comes to a really clean point, so I can get fine lines and I can cover big areas as well. So if I were going to invest in just a couple of brushes, that's what I would get. I would get like a fatter round that comes to a really good tip, and then I would get a long liner brush like this. Can't say it enough. Don't use those cheap plastic brushes either. These aren't that expensive. I just got them at Michael's. So then once we have some mountains in place, I'm going to come back in and do some round work. So then I'm gonna leave a little space, and now I'm going in a different direction. I'm gonna take paint off sort of at a horizontal sweep. The only thing I've dipped my brush in so far is the vodka. And the first time you lay the vodka on the paint, it doesn't really do much, but as you sweep back and forth, it starts to lift the color. Okay. So I'm gonna go and really pull out some whites by cleaning off the blue pretty good in some of these forward areas, just to get them to pop out a little more. So now just spin it and find out where you want your front to be. So to put the scenery in, we've got our paints over here. And as far as scenery goes, we're gonna start with trees. So the trees that are further back are actually gonna be lighter than the trees that are more in the foreground because atmosphere. So atmosphere, if you ever look at on a hazy day, if you're looking at a landscape, driving past a mountain range, you will notice the things that are further away are sort of more muted and toned down. And that's because atmosphere is dulling the color, sort of blending things and making things more hazy. So the trees that are going to be closer to the mountains are going to be more muted. So in order to do that, there would just be less saturated, so more diluted color. It's an easy way to achieve that. So basically, without panicking, I'm just going to come in and start to put in some trees. And doing that, I'm using my same brush. I have my round brush, so I'm just going to decide where I want them to go. And I'm going to put some just in here. Just starting with some vertical lines. You don't have to press down that much because I'm using the tip of my brush. I'm just indicating where the trees are going to be and some trunks, basically. So I'm just going to have them down in there. Once I have the vertical lines in, then all I have to do is I'm just going to dab. And the trees will be thicker at the base. And it's a clump of trees, so it's not like you're painting each individual leaf or anything like that. Sort of moving my brush back and forth like this and getting wider. And then I'm gonna just dab out to the side to create some little bushes along this top of this line that I created. So dabbing, moving my brush out. There's a little tree. Can you see him? There's a bunch of little trees there. If you want to define it a little more, you can come in with a slightly smaller brush. I'm dipping more straight into the center blob of paint that I had instead of the outer edges where the vodka was. Okay, so I just pulled out a few little trees here. The color, it might be pretty saturated and wet with the paint, so if you see that it's starting to just sort of blend back into it, into the previous layer, you can just sort of stop on that area for a little bit and let that dry and then come back in and add more detail. I'm gonna come in just a little bit, a couple more trees over here that are sort of separate from this pack. Then to add some visual interest, I'm going to come in with some bigger trees because I want them to sort of frame the picture. So we'll start off a little bit light. These are going to start here. They're going to go all the way up. Just going to make a couple of them to start. Maybe right here. My bigger brush. And it's just the same thing. I'm eventually going to make that darker. It's just, I don't want to go in too dark right away. I do get a little timid too sometimes, so. Then over here. This tree is also going to be dark. Just going in with my less diluted color. And then remembering that the light's coming from this way, just going to, with the paint that's left on my brush, sort of make little shadows under the trees that are sort of leaning away. Just so that the trunk is sort of rooted into the ground, so it's not just floating there. And then if you want some to seem like some of the sunlight's coming and dappling through the trees, just take some of the color away. Let's do one more little tree back here, just so it's not 2 and 2. Do another third one, so same thing. Getting wider at the base. We got his little trunk hitting the ground, but it looks like it's floating, so I'm just gonna swoop over, give him a little shadow. I think I want to put even some more darker areas in this one, just to really pull him forward, which is counterintuitive to be like, I need to make this darker to pull it forward, but that's how it is when you're doing these sort of silhouetted sort of landscape paintings. And like, for instance, this, I think it got 2, just like a straight line for the branches, so you can always take away. Just sort of break up that line a little bit. Now let's go ahead and we are just going to tuck a tiny little house back in here. And so how are we going to do this? So I'm just going to sketch a tiny little house back in these trees. It's also going to be silhouetted. I'm not going to do anything complicated. Again, you can find a little house on the internet if you don't want to make up one. Just have a little silhouetted house back there. It's got its basic shape. Then I want the little rooftops to be sort of snow covered. So I'm taking away the color. And you can see how fine of detail I can get with this big brush. So there's that, and then I want it sort of buried in the snow, so then all you have to do is come in, swoop in, and look at that. Now it looks like it's nestled in the snow. right. By just taking away a little bit of the color in front of it, so it looks like it has like a little, sitting in a little mound of snow. And I want it to be a little bit darker. So I added a little chimney just by making a dark line on there. And then of course the little chimney needs a shadow. So all you have to do is just make a light little line. If the sun's coming this way, the shadow is going to be on this side of the chimney. And then let's make it so somebody's home. So a little smoke is going to be coming from the chimney. And I'm just going to create that by taking some of the paint away. So swirling it up. And then I think a fun little touch to have would be just to have maybe a little deer right over here. So it's just going to be very simple. I guess maybe it's a buck. I'm going to paint little antlers on him. And you want him to not look like he's floating. So once again, let's just take a little bit of ground away from him. So that he looks like he's behind a little mound of snow. It just peeped out from outside these little trees. And then just to help him stand out a little bit, he's a little small, so I might go in with a little white to sort of pop some highlights. So I put a little white in my palette, taking a very thin brush, and I'm just going to go on parts of the little buck that is facing the sun and might get some sunlight, just so you can see him a little better. Little antlers. I need my glasses. I'm really fighting wearing glasses. I need them. I don't want to need them. There he is. Let's come in. Pop some highlights on the chimney. And then with the white as well, I'm going to make a little window. If you wanted to put little snow on the tree, you could come in and dapple some paint on, some white paint. Just on the top of the boughs. You might want to do this with a brush that's a little thrashed because you're pushing. And not everything's going to have equal detail. That's sort of how you give a hierarchy to what you want people to focus on. So you might want to hit the brightness of the white more on the side that's facing the sun. You can have a little bit back here. I don't want too much, but just to indicate that there is some snow. And then of course, the last thing you want to do is just peel all this paper off carefully. You want to peel away from the cake. So going this way, just going to pull it going away from my cake. And then you will have little spots you have to clean up. Just take one of your brushes, dipped in a little vodka, or sometimes a little Crisco will clean the board too.